Today, let's master G proteins. Here's an easy mnemonic. Quick calcium. Stimulates cyclic AMP. Inhibits cyclic AMP. There are many G protein coupled receptors, but today we'll focus on the three that are tested most often. GQ is coupled to alpha-1. GS is coupled to beta-1. GI is coupled to D2. So, how do you remember them? According to memory science, your brain remembers stories much better than isolated facts. So instead of memorizing random receptor and G protein pairs, let's use the story method. This is one of the most effective ways to build long-term memory. First, let's look at alpha-1. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, blood vessels constrict. Smooth muscle contraction requires calcium. So, when you think of calcium, think of GQ. Quick calcium. And when you think of GQ, think of alpha-1. Next, let's look at beta-1. Think about the heart. When the heart needs to beat faster and stronger, it needs more energy. That means more cyclic AMP. More cyclic AMP means GS. So, think of the heart. Think of more cyclic AMP. Then think of GS. And finally, think of beta-1. Now, let's look at D2. D2 mainly acts as a brake. A brake slows things down. That means less cyclic AMP. Less cyclic AMP means GI. So, think of a brake. Think of less cyclic AMP. Then think of GI. And finally, think of D2. Don't memorize receptor and G protein pairs separately. Instead, remember three simple stories. GQ means contraction and calcium. GS means the accelerator and more cyclic AMP. GI means the brake and less cyclic AMP. That's how your brain builds strong, long-term memories. Now that you've mastered the G proteins, let's move on to the second messengers. Here's the high-yield table you need to know. GQ increases IP3, DAG, and calcium. GS increases cyclic AMP, GI decreases cyclic AMP. So, how do you remember all of this? Once again, let's use the story method. According to memory science, stories are much easier for your brain to remember than isolated facts. First, let's look at GQ. There are only 4 main characters in this story. GQ turns on phospholipase C. Phospholipase C cuts IP2. IP3 runs to the endoplasmic reticulum. Calcium produces the cellular response. Now let's put the whole story together. The receptor rings the bell. GQ wakes up phospholipase C. Phospholipase C cuts PIP2. PIP2 is split into IP3 and DAG. IP3 runs to the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum opens its calcium channels. Calcium floods into the cytoplasm. That's the entire GQ pathway. Next, let's look at GS. This pathway is simply the story of making cyclic AMP from ATP. The main character is ATP. There are only 3 characters. GS turns on adenylyl cyclase. Adenylyl cyclase makes cyclic AMP from ATP. Protein kinase A responds to cyclic AMP. Now let's tell the story. The receptor rings the bell. GS turns on the factory. The factory is adenylyl cyclase. Adenylyl cyclase converts ATP into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP wakes up protein kinase A. That's the entire GS pathway. Finally, let's look at GI. This pathway is simply the opposite of GS. Instead of making cyclic AMP, it shuts down the cyclic AMP factory. The receptor rings the bell. GI shuts down the factory. Adenylyl cyclase stops working. ATP is no longer converted into cyclic AMP. As a result, cyclic AMP decreases. Protein kinase A activity also decreases. That's the entire GI pathway. Let's summarize everything. Alpha-1 adrenergic receptors couple to GQ. GQ activates phospholipase C, producing IP3, DAG, and calcium. Beta-1 adrenergic receptors couple to GS. GS activates adenylyl cyclase, increasing cyclic AMP. D2 dopamine receptors couple to GI. GI inhibits adenylyl cyclase, decreasing cyclic AMP. Remember these three simple stories. GQ is the calcium story, GS is the cyclic AMP factory story, GI is the story of shutting the factory down. If you remember these stories, you'll remember the pathways. So far, we've learned one representative receptor for each G protein. Now let's expand that knowledge. Here are the other high-yield receptors you should know. This list looks overwhelming, but don't memorize it as one long list. Instead, let's use chunking, a learning strategy supported by memory science. Breaking information into smaller, meaningful groups makes it much easier for your brain to remember. Instead of memorizing receptors first, remember them in this order. G protein, then physiological function, then receptor. GQ is the contraction and secretion group. GQ increases calcium. When calcium increases, what happens? Blood vessels constrict. Smooth muscle contracts. Glands secrete. That's it. Now look at the receptors. Alpha-1 causes vasoconstriction. M3 causes contraction of the gut, bladder, and bronchi, and stimulates glandular secretion. H1 causes bronchoconstriction. V1 causes vasoconstriction. AT1 causes vasoconstriction. They are all receptors that cause contraction. So whenever you see GQ, think calcium, then contraction. Let's make it even easier with chunking. There are only three functional groups. First, blood vessel constriction. Second, visceral smooth muscle contraction. Third, allergic reactions, including secretion and bronchoconstriction. So remember them like this. Blood vessel constriction. Alpha-1. V1. AT1. Visceral smooth muscle contraction. Think of the gut, the bladder, and the bronchi. Remember, M3. Allergic reactions. Think of secretion. And bronchoconstriction. Remember, H1. That's it. Let's review. GQ is the contraction and secretion group. Think of three physiological functions. Blood vessel constriction. Visceral smooth muscle contraction. And allergic reactions. For blood vessel constriction, remember Alpha-1, V1, and AT1. For visceral smooth muscle contraction, remember M3. For allergic reactions, remember H1. Now, let's move on to GS. GS is the accelerator group. GS increases cyclic AMP. More cyclic AMP makes cells work harder. Let's make it even easier with chunking. Think of GS as the group that powers up body functions. There are only three functional groups. First, power up. Run more. Second, produce more. Third, increase blood flow. So, remember them like this. Power up. Run more. Beta-1 increases heart activity. Beta-2 causes bronchodilation. Produce more. H2 increases gastric acid secretion. V2 increases water reabsorption. Increase blood flow. D1 increases renal blood flow. That's it. Let's review. GS powers up body functions. There are only three functional groups. First, power up. run more. Second, produce more. Third, increase blood flow. Power up, run more. Beta 1 increases heart activity. Beta 2 causes bronchodilation. Produce more. H2 increases gastric acid secretion. V2 increases water reabsorption. Increase blood flow. D1 increases renal blood flow. Finally, let's look at GI. GI is the brake group. GI decreases cyclic AMP. Less cyclic AMP decreases cellular activity. Just ask yourself, what does this receptor want to slow down? GI quiets the body. There are only 3 functional groups. First, quiet the brain. Second, slow the heart. Third, relieve pain. Quiet the brain. Stop neurotransmitters. Prevent excessive neurotransmitter release. So remember, alpha-2 decreases norepinephrine release. D2 decreases dopamine release. These 2 receptors belong to the same group. They both stop neurotransmitter release. Slow the heart. Let the heart rest. So remember, M2 decreases the heart rate. Relieve pain. Quiet neuronal activity. So remember, the Mu-Opioid receptor decreases neuronal activity. GI means slow down. Quiet the brain, alpha-2 and D2. Slow the heart, M2. Relieve pain, the Mu-Opioid receptor. That's it. What does this receptor want to slow down? Brain. Heart. Pain. Whenever you see GI, think slow down. Your brain remembers meaningful chunks much better than isolated facts. Ready to level up? Let's chunk it one more time. This is how you lock it into your long-term memory and score high on the exam. This time, don't think about receptor names. Think in neurotransmitter families. First, the adrenergic receptors. Alpha-1 couples to GQ. It causes blood vessel constriction. Alpha-2 couples to GI. It inhibits the release of norepinephrine. Beta-1 couples to GS. It makes the heart beat faster and stronger. Beta-2 also couples to GS. It causes bronchodilation. That's it. Just remember one simple rule. Alpha receptors split into 2 groups. Alpha-1 is GQ, alpha-2 is GI. And beta receptors are almost always GS. Next, the muscarinic receptors. M1 couples to GQ. It activates neurons and increases gastric secretion. M2 couples to GI. It slows the heart by decreasing the heart rate. M3 couples to GQ. It causes smooth muscle contraction and glandular secretion. Here's the famous USMLE rule. Odd equals GQ. Even equals GI. So, M1 is GQ, M2 is GI. M3 is GQ. If you include all 5 muscarinic receptors, M1, M3, and M5 are GQ, M2 and M4 are GI. This is one of the highest yield rules for the exam. Now, the dopamine receptors. D1 couples to GS. It increases renal blood flow. D2 couples to GI. It inhibits dopamine release. Notice the symmetry. D1 is the accelerator. D2 is the brake. Next, the histamine receptors. H1 couples to GQ. It mediates allergic reactions. H2 couples to GS. It increases gastric acid secretion. Finally, the vasopressin receptors. V1 couples to GQ. It causes blood vessel constriction. V2 couples to GS. It increases water reabsorption in the kidney. Now let's review the key patterns. Alpha receptors split into GQ and GI. Beta receptors are almost always GS, odd muscarinic receptors are GQ. Even muscarinic receptors are GI. D1 is the accelerator. D2 is the brake. H1 causes allergy. H2 increases gastric acid. V1 constricts blood vessels. V2 saves water. Don't memorize 13 separate receptors. Instead, memorize the patterns. That's how high-scoring students build long-term memory. Learn smarter, not harder. See you in the next lesson.
For quick, powerful reviews, this is the only channel. Don't forget to subscribe.